Johannesburg, Wits University is hosting its annual Gas Symposium, drawing energy experts, industry leaders and government officials to discuss the role of gas in South Africa's energy mix. This gathering focuses on critical issues such as energy security, economic growth and sustainability as the country looks to diversify its energy mix with more clean and reliable options. Let's get you a sense of what else we know. Bring in SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai, who's live to us now from Parktown in Johannesburg. And Tshepo, this comes at a time when many people have spoken about a gas cliff that South Africa is facing, speaking to how, our gas reserves in some instances may significantly decline in the next couple of years.
Absolutely, and good morning. Of course, the issue of a gas cliff is one that has actually received a spotlight here at the Wits Business School Natural Gas Symposium. You would know that for the longest time, as South Africa, we've been dependent on one source of natural gas under Sasol, sourced from Mozambique, and of course, we know that that particular source is now being depleted, and Sasol has actually announced that in the next few years, in fact 2026, industrial users must actually find alternative source. So this is what anchors discussions here, where people, different stakeholders are gathering here to explore various avenues that will ensure that we avoid the so-called gas cliff. For more on this, I'm now joined by Priscilla Mabelani. She is the Wits Business School Advisory Board member and chairperson, and she's also a former Vice President of Energy at Sasol Petrochemical Giant. Thank you very much for joining us at this very important discussions for the country. Just tell us, how did we get to this point where we are facing a natural gas cliff?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, listeners, and to you, Tshepo, as well, and thanks for the opportunity. Let me try and answer your question in the positive. We are where we are. The key element of today at the Wits Business School that we are looking at is taking the lessons learned and particularly reflecting on where we are. What will it take for us to accelerate the access and security of gas supply in the country, and at the same time to make sure that we can actually drive other sectors and applications that will depend on gas. For me, earlier on, I mentioned that we should look at this not necessarily as only a security of supply issue, but as an opportunity to drive economic stimulation, create jobs, and to be able to ensure that we can transform and transition as a country. So at the back of that, for me, there are three key elements that needs to be addressed. First of all, you've already mentioned that the dependency on one source of supply has been an issue of challenge. So we have regional integration, but at the same time, we also have ports that provides us opportunity in the medium term to be able to accelerate the diversification of our supply. So we do believe that putting in the policies that enable infrastructure development, particularly Transnet, I'm encouraged by the role that they're leading now and driving the development of Richards Bay as a priority port. So that is quite critical. So that diversification strategy is one element that needs to be unlocked. The second element that is much more critical is how do we ensure that as other sectors are going to reduce their demand for LNG, because they can't afford it. As we know, it is actually driven by global dynamics, but also it is going to be dollar-based. So LNG is not affordable for certain sectors, so we expect that the demand is going to reduce. We've already had Sasol mentioning that they will not afford LNG in their operations. So we need another source to be able to anchor, to make sure we've got the scale required to anchor an LNG terminal. The minister earlier on spoke about the ability to be able to bring substantial LNG into the country through one of our terminals, which is Richards Bay, and that will require a minimum of 80 to 100 petajoules that we need to bring in. So the power to gas is also important to anchor the LNG demand. And I think thirdly, that's a medium-term solution that we can unlock now. But thirdly, we have to have clear direction, policy and investment attractions to be able to drive our indigenous gas. And earlier on, as we're listening, there was a discussion that shows just on offshore, we've got 50 to 60 TCF of natural gas that we need to be able to unlock. That might take another 10 years to do that. But you start anchoring it in the medium term with your LNG, diversifying both Mozambique and Richards Bay as your sources of supply, and then in the midst of that, unlocking the potential LNG growth, natural gas that we see in the country. And that, for me, is what should drive us as one community, both the private sector and the public sector. We need to stop pointing fingers at one another and work as a collective.
I mean, there's tend to be a lot of focus on industrial users, but there's a lot of domestic users as well. Where does this put domestic users? Because I'm sure many of them are watching this development and are concerned. It's winter now, and many of them use natural gas to warm.
Now, certainly, I think South Africa has got two types of gas supply to the domestic market, particularly to the households. One is LPG, which is basically imported when we used to have a lot of refineries that used to be refined here. So that will not be impacted. And I've had a lot of people saying, should I be buying more bottles as I approach 2028, 2029? We believe that will continue to be a source of supply. But most importantly, lots of countries globally are dependent on natural gas for heating, for cooking. And given the abundance of gas in our country, we also need to make sure that the domestic market is also achieved. So the anchoring through the gas to power will actually enable us to even broaden the application of natural gas. When you look at most countries globally, gas is utilized much more broadly in transportation, in domestic, but also, as you mentioned, industrial. And even industrial is not penetrated in a number of industries. So if we can unlock our natural gas, we can actually stimulate a bigger industry and create more jobs and improve the economy. So the GDP that we're seeing, economic growth that we're seeing in the country, can actually increase substantially. We've seen it in countries like Qatar as well as countries like the US, where that drives the economic development.
Given the time that we're dealing with, which is quite limited, you're talking about investment, especially at the ports in terms of storage and so forth, and LNG being an option, but the cost bringing down. Do we have much time to put in place such measures?
I think every day we lose is a constraint, but at the same time, with the Minister of Energy, Electricity and Energy, the plans that he's putting forward, the gas master plan that he's actually driving, in parallel to entities such as Eskom as well as the Transnet that are already taking strategic direction, putting the energy and the resources in developing another alternative of LNG importation through Richards Bay, I'm encouraged. But what it will take is that we do not have sufficient time to be able to have any gap. So we are on a critical path, and the actions needs to be accelerated. If we accelerate, I have confidence that we'll be able to deliver on our commitment to the South African in terms of ensuring that we can secure jobs. What remains critical as well is to find an aggregator. And I was encouraged earlier on by the minister saying that the state will play that critical role of aggregation, because this is one of the things that was a challenge in the past, is who has the balance sheet to be able to enter into a contract with the suppliers of the molecules, because Transnet is driving actually the infrastructure, but we need someone else to also drive and put their balance sheet to be able to secure the molecules, and that is encouraging. So all of those developments accelerated will be able to achieve what we plan to do.
And that will also deal with issues of funding. Let me thank you very much for your time. That's Priscilla Mabelane. She is with Wits Business School Advisory Board. She is the chair there. Of course, there are a whole lot of issues that are coming out here with regard to both short-term and medium-term options that South Africa can definitely explore to ensure that we avoid that cliff, or so-called natural gas cliff. With that, back to you in studio.
Fascinating discussion indeed. Tshepo Mongoai live to us there from Wits University. Tshepo, of course, is our economics editor here at the SABC News Channel.